There are a number of things that I tend to disagree on the internet with a lot of things, at least the current internet with the state of affairs on a lot of things. I don't tend to actively participate in spreading memes or joking around with them, only in the context of a setting with or around my particular friends if they're particularly messing around with something like that. But even then, I'm not particularly the meme meister and don't tend to want to give them much attention, as usually they're formed out of simplistic desires or understandings of particular media in general. If the subject matter isn't something I'm not interested in the first place, and if the subject actively hits a place close to home, I just don't really want to even touch or be within readable visual distance of it because I literally don't care about it. But memes are not about why I'm here today. I've disagreed on the internet about many things, and one of those things, the title should be obvious enough, is spoilers. I never seem to really care about them. In fact, I don't see the big hullabaloo about them. I don't understand why people feel that there must be some absolute necessary way to experience one thing, as there are hundreds of ways to do that, which most people tend to be really simplistic in understanding their idea of experiencing a certain thing, that it must be experienced the way the devs intended it to be. But sometimes that's not always the case, and sometimes things can be better off that way. I'll point to a relatively recent example. There was a leak a couple of years ago, or I think it was a year ago, regarding the release of a game called Mario vs. Rabbids Kingdom Battle. I have not played this game. I have not even given it really the light of day beyond a couple of videos some guys played on another channel. But the game was leaked shortly before its reveal at E3 that year. Last year, I think. Many people felt that after the reveal, the game, when they saw it properly at the reveal, were a bit more accepting of the game and could at least understand how the appeal of the game could really happen, that it could really exist as a fundamental thing for these companies, Ubisoft and Nintendo. I'm not here to discuss on end about that game as I've never played it, but spoils impacted that game's lifespan and how it was received. Well, I don't really know about lifespan, but more so how it was received. I don't really care. I'm running low on words here. But there are many different ways to experience something. And yes, your first experience is only going to be your first. It is going to be your first experience can only be experienced once. Yeah. So how about you make the most of it? Anything that you're going to see in a game or product, if you are interested in it, you are inevitably going to see the events of something anyway. So why delay the inevitable? Yes, of course, it's obvious the companies want to hide everything from you so then they can give you surprises, but why do you have to be the culprit of all of these surprises? Why not just some of them, or understand how some of these surprises could be interesting instead of just wow, or be in awe of what something was? This something most people don't seem to care about. A long time ago, a long time ago, I owned a Nintendo DS flash card. It was a Cyclo DS Evolution. I use this constantly to hack in Pokemon, but that's not what I want to talk about just yet. One of the games I experienced was the multiplayer of Super Mario 64 DS. And when I played that game, I wanted to play the original game for real. So I ended up asking for it from the DS flashcard as how it worked then, because I had no real proper access to the internet. My friend who had recommended me the card had access to basically every single Nintendo DS ROM, and she could give them to me if I so asked. And we were relatively good friends, and if I'm being honest, without her I would have never understood how some of these games work or how appealing some of the stuff even is at all. So I am absolutely in debt to her. Anyway, I asked this game off of her and she gave me it that a few days after. The Cyclo DS was preloaded with, and since has been a bit weird with it, was preloaded with cheats for some of the older games. Generally, of what the preload had, games that were released pre-2007 were generally ones with the cheats, as they have been the most studied and understood. Super Mario 64 DS being released in 2004, and this was my rule of thumb, that, by the way, not all games released before 2007 had cheats in them, but of the ones that did, they generally were in that time frame. Super Mario 64 DS had cheats, and I enabled a few of them. Most of these were progression skips to skip most of the stars and grab most of the keys and play as all the characters. What I wanted to do was free roam around the game to understand how it worked first. This was 2009. I hadn't heard of this game before playing the multiplayer. There were no advertisements, there wasn't anything. I had not heard of this game at all before I had injected the ROM into my flashcard. So I opened the game up and I started playing the game immediately. The first level I remember experiencing in Super Mario 64 DS was Lethal Lava Land. How many people can you ask on the internet will have said that? Not just that, I'm going to continue on further with that point. The first couple of things I did in Lethal Lava Land was messing around with most of the cheats that I had at my disposal to basically stuff around and do stuffy things. Basically, because of an infinite health code the game had, which was preloaded into the thing, I could, along with a moon jump, basically create a game for myself where the animation where Mario jumps out of the lava and what you're supposed to do is jump on land because you would get hurt in that instance. Instead of simply just jumping in lava accidentally to fall onto the surface, I would instead joke around with myself and my friends at the time that I was instead of jumping around because I'd lost health or made a mistake, I was instead able to jetpack myself across the level however much I wanted. And it basically was a jetpack because the flame would keep appearing every time I pressed the jump button. So it was basically like an infinite jetpack. Yes, or infinite butt pack, I guess, if you really want to get that intricate. But those were my first experiences playing Super Mario 64 ever. These experiences being the first. I later ended up playing the game and getting an emulator and doing all the fun machinima stuff you see earlier on this channel. And I did also record the DS for other reasons. There is a glitch video on this channel with Super Mario 64 DS recorded because I found out of a glitch on Super Mario Wiki and wanted to get a video of it. But see, your first experience, my first experience hasn't always been what the devs intend it to be every single time. Especially since, yes, the devs do want you to experience something at the start, but are they words of God? Yes, they did create the thing, but do you really have to follow that as if they're like words that must be treasured or that mustn't be sinned or something? This is exactly why I don't tend to worry about spoilers of a story or game or movie or something, because if it's something I'm interested in, like say the story of Splatoon, I'm going to come across it anyway in my own time. So what does it matter if I'm going to come across a certain couple of details just a bit sooner than what I'd expect? Why delay the inevitable? Back with the Cycler DS point, I'll tell you now about how I hacksawed Pokemon. I used to use cheats for that as well, which is why I said pre-2007. I think Diamond and Pearl was released like originally 2006, so it was only just the cusp of that whole thing, because Platinum didn't get any cheats on it until I loaded them in a newer Evo cheats file later. But Diamond and Pearl had lots of cheats, and I hacksawed that game a lot too. I hacksawed that game to the point where some of my fondest memories of that game are hacking it. And not only that, the memories of hacking it are some of the only experiences that I have had that make my experience unique from other people's experiences. There was someone who used to talk to me a long time ago. We were in school while Pokemon was a massive fad. Yeah, it was a massive fad here for like a couple weeks. But they were saying that they were trading Pokemon. They also had, I think, hacking devices. I don't think they had the same card, but they definitely had hacking devices, because they asked me at one point when we were trading Pokemon, do you want a Celebi? And I said, yeah, I want a Celebi. And then they said, green or pink? And that was a bit weird, because at that point, I hadn't played Mystery Dungeon properly, and I did not know that there was such a thing as pink Celebes. I knew there were green ones, but not pink ones. I did not know what shiny Pokemon were. They were not explained in the guidebook when I had it originally, and the first one I found I thought was a glitch. I got it, but I didn't know what they were, and I had no idea that pink Celebi was a shiny Celebi. So I just said pink because I was like, there's such a thing as pink Celebes, that's cool. And keep in mind, this was around the time frame when I made the Pinkalol name, bearing in mind the name Pinkalol was made in the first place because my favorite color at the time was pink. So I did the same thing with other people, ended up haxing Pokemon for them as well. I did the same thing and still continue to wherever I can. Hacksaw Pokemon for people if they so want it. And the happiness that I tended to receive from people who received these Pokemon, regardless of if they were late game Pokemon or if they were just something they needed to catch on the street, it was immeasurable how much praise that was. How they could technically sort of skip certain things by just having a different Pokemon. And, like, I skipped most of the game myself too. In fact, there's a glitch, I think, of an untriggered flag I had left for the longest time. I think it's fixed now. But I had an untriggered flag in my diamond file for a long time to leave the guy who's sitting behind, or I don't know if it's behind, but it's the route leading to Sunny Shore City. The guy who blocks your path at the Acuity corner, that guy was still there, and Even though I'd gone past him to Sunny Shores and beaten the league several times at that point, I didn't know how to properly trigger that flag so I could get him to go, but at some point I did, and he's gone now. But, like, I enjoyed messing around playing in that thing, and their experiences that I can recount that not many other people can do themselves. Many people will say about a particular game, like a particular story they like, let's say a Sonic game. Many people will say that they enjoyed playing a certain part, that these parts were fun, and I've played some of these same games in the exact same manner, but you can't say these experiences are unique to you, because you just can't. These experiences, everyone's gone through the same passageways a billion times, but can anyone say, oh, I went into the void and counted how many steps I went for a Poketch to, track myself down a Darkrai years and years after the event ended? I don't think many people can say that. And not only that, I don't think many people can say what I said before about the guy with the untriggered flag at Sunnyshore's. Most people probably wouldn't even know that that even existed until I told you right there. This is exactly why I don't tend to care about spoilers, because the experiences that I have with knowing them beforehand tend to be more unique than those that don't know what's happening around the corner or whatever. And not to mention, sometimes it can be really, really, really overblown. Like, the concern and worry for these spoilers is taken like to extreme amounts of concern. Another recent example, Splatoon 2. When Splatoon 2 released in July 2017, there were so many people. I couldn't even begin to tell you. So many people on Reddit, on everywhere, who were claiming, don't go on the internet, there will be spoilers about the game. And, like, as if the spoilers were like a bad thing, as if they're gonna be like a bully or a bot and completely destroy you. I went actively looking for these spoilers because I wanted to see, oh, okay, if these spoilers are everywhere, then surely there must be a lot of information about the game that I can gather that I'll know more about before people, will get the chance to play it and see it for themselves. Like, about the story, maybe. And the only thing I found when I actively digged for it, only a couple of minutes after I was actively digging for it, let me tell you that, was a 10-minute video of screenshots relating to the final boss. Nothing about the game, nothing about how, like how the story even looks or how the worlds look. Nah, just the final boss cutscenes, not even animated, just screenshots. I went actively looking. I checked 4chan threads, I checked everywhere, because people were saying, oh, there's spoilers, don't look up the internet for them. And I actively went Splatoon 2 spoilers in Google and only found shortly after I was looking at that 10-minute video I just mentioned. Hyperbole much? But, yeah. Because even then, I've experienced, like I said before, with how I've played Sonic games, I've played most of the games I play now. I experience them the legit way, knowing as much as I do, even with every single piece of spoiler and lore on my goddamn head before I play a particular thing, which isn't much. And let me tell you, even with that knowledge, some things can be boring or even exciting. Like, I already knew about those screenshots from the final boss. The final boss was still a joy to beat in Splatoon 2. And still, I know it's underwhelming compared to the first one, and, the expansion was much better, but I still was able to write my own story about Splatoon 2, knowing what the story had to offer around the end. And on the other scale, in terms of how boring something actually is, Super Mario Odyssey. No, I'm not going to say it's a masterpiece. It's just a good game. I'm not going to incessantly praise it because there are many aspects of it that, even having gone through everything now, I just find extremely boring. Super Mario Odyssey, I guess, like, is Mario Zelda-ified because, well, everything only has one purpose and you use it only for that particular purpose, and everything leads to moons. Like, okay, someone made a 2-hour dissection video on it, and I agree with most of the points made in that video, but Mario Odyssey is basically Mario Zelda-ified because there's no fun stuff to grabbing a Paragoomba and messing around with it. All you can do is fly. Like, again, with the cheats in Super Mario 64 DS, nothing about my moveset was taken away. Things were just added on, like the moon jump and the progression. The moon jump just allowed me to make that butt jetpack thing just a bit more fun, to enhance the game a bit more. The Paragoomba, all you can do is flap its wings, and it's only useful for a few stars, and all you can do is flap your wings with it. And not only that, you can't even, once you reach a certain height threshold, you can't fly upwards any further. You're just stuck within this narrow area of flight, and that's it. You can't fly or up any further. It's just artificial and limited, and all of the enemies in that game that are capturable are exactly like that. Like, there's no incentive to just messing around with them because you can't use them to do a whole lot outside of their intended purposes, which made the game extremely boring for me, and now makes me think, gee, I don't want to play another Mario game again, and I'll probably just go back to 64 endlessly, because at least there I could just mess around to my pleasure. I even used to do I say used to, but I still do it if I come across a book. If I come across a book, sometimes I'll skip to the couple end pages before I go to the front ones. I don't read the book backwards, I just read a couple of the end pages. Because what's more interesting to me is how the ending is achieved, not what the ending is or what happens. Nothing about the what interests me, because it feels like I'm being duped half the time. Like I was stupid and probably should have known that from the beginning. What interests me when I play a particular story or thing or hear about a movie or game is how the ending is achieved. The events, the journey leading up to the conclusion. Not how surprising it was that this person did a thing and that's apparently the cornerstone of the entire story. No. There were a couple of books I used to read. I sometimes go back to them because they were pretty okay books in my opinion for kids' entertainment. I was reading them generally when I was 12, 13-ish, I think. Anyway, I was reading them during my preteen years, and they were books called Animal Magic, and they were a continuous story about a girl in a pet shop, and how she figures out that the pet shop is like like the pet shop and her family has had all this magical heritage, and they've got this whole history and these things happening. What was more interesting to me when I was reading that as a kid is how those events unfolded, how things changed. I would do the same thing with those books where I would pause a couple of the end pages and then go back to the start to read how the ending plays out, how they get to that ending. It's a bit more satisfying that way because you know the ending already, but who cares if you know the ending already? You do that for repeat watchers, and you then tend to use the excuses that I say here, that it's more fun to watch how the events play out after the second run, because your first run's only going to be experienced once. Well, sure. But in that case, why not make your first one memorable for the reasons not just created by the devs? Which is exactly why my mentality when I played those games, when I approach anything nowadays, along with the inevitable fact that if I'm gonna come across it on the internet, it's gonna come up anyway. There are people who don't care about spoilers like I do. I know that. I'm not saying this because I'm the only person, but I'm part of that minority, and I literally don't care whether I come across a particular spoiler or not. Who cares? You're really gonna care that much about how the devs made a particular thing? Like, how they made it so that you get surprised at this particular thing? Seriously? I'm sure if you find interest in that sort of thing, I guess that's interesting. But it just seems extremely weak to just like accept things on the surface level of the what and not hows, and like, you know, to just, this first experience must be how the devs created that experience, even though your first experience doesn't always have to be that way. In fact, that's exactly why people watch trailers and stuff, to judge that. And yeah, sure, the devs wanted to reveal the trailer to you, so the trailer's fine. The trailer already reveals parts of it anyway, and inevitably you're going to see those parts anyway, so you're going to get those parts out of the way but not the rest of it. What does it matter if the major reveals are revealed to you earlier than intended? What does it matter? You're inevitably going to see it anyway, and your reaction will be the same, with some minor differences that don't really matter. Like, ooh, hold up, let me think of something. Like, ooh, Callie was evil in Splatoon 2. Like, we kind of knew that something was going to happen to her anyway after the fact she lost the Splatfest. We knew something was going to happen to her. That's exactly why the Splatfest took place. That's exactly why Marie is shown in the trailer instead of her. That is exactly why. Why delay the fact you know she's mind controlled if you know something's happened to her anyway? What does it matter if you already know? You're inevitably going to know anyway, and most of the, or maybe not, that's a bit of a grand assumption. Some of the people who are watching this video have probably already known about it already. Why delay knowing about it if you're inevitably going to hear about it anyway? Is a question I keep asking, and exactly the reason why I continue to actively look for spoilers, because like, what, it's like, you're inevitably going to see it, and you're inevitably going to talk about it anyway after the fact. So, why delay it? Not to mention, I used to, even after I did the whole butt pack, jetpack, Yoshi Pokemon ordeal. That was like years and years ago. But years after that, I used to believe the internet and take part in this avoiding the spoilers thing because, oh no, it'd be terrible if I viewed the game before its release. You want to know what that was? Extremely boring. It takes more effort to avoid spoilers than to just read them and have your opinion for what it is. What does it matter where you see a certain piece of information if, like, you know, it's inevitably going to be posted everywhere afterwards? That's not a problem of people not being considerate of others. That's just the fact of how information spreads. People tend to get all whiny about spoilers, and I'm just like, personally, I'm just like, what's it matter? In terms of, like, experiencing it the way the devs want you to. There are hundreds of ways to first experience something. And, like, you don't need to just code it with, oh, the devs did it this way. The devs, the artists, whoever, the author, the composer, whoever did it this way, so they want you to see it this way. Do you know that generally concepts don't come up in the order that they are shown to you in the game? Remember that, say, Splatoon's gameplay was formulated first before all the Squid Kid stuff, but the thing that's shown to you first is all the Squid Kid stuff. The town, the everything. All of that was conceived after their base gameplay with all the fun stuff. The devs may have put it together a certain way, sure, but when they originally made it, they didn't make it the way you sequentially see it in the game. That's not how it works. That's not how anything works. There are lots of things where the end of a story or the middle of a story will be created before the first part of a story. I remember a long time ago, I hadn't seen the movie Inside Out. I was interested in it because it looked like a particularly interesting movie. And I remember, I got the DVD of it, and after I watched the movie the first time, I then went and watched the creators' interview because, you know, I just tend to be interested in hearing about it, at least how these things came together. And they mentioned that the scene around the middle of the movie was made as one of the first ideas as what they wanted to experiment with for the movie, and then all the rest of it came into place. A scene in the middle of the movie was created and conceptualized first, then all the other stuff, including the beginning, was afterwards. The way the devs intend it is like that goes through a long series of discussions and such, and a long series of reorganizing. And there are so many ways to first experience something, because when they first experienced making the thing, they didn't experience making the thing the way you see it sequentially now. And, oh boy. It's just generally, since this is subjective, I guess there's not really much to say. I kind of like how the how of things is presented. Kind of wish some people would see it that way too, instead of just constantly whining that spoilers is the end of the earth and that you shouldn't see them or whatever. It's personal preference. No need to dictate others on how they should enjoy their own entertainment. Pretty sure you should be able to tell for yourself what you enjoy, and for me, that's seeing everything before I see the thing, because, yeah, then I can actually see the thing with a few more eyes than not seeing it, than seeing it with lesser eyes, I suppose. Not knowing certain things and then just feeling duped, or even if I don't feel duped, I'll feel like, I should have known that or something, and there's no time to analyze it or think about it further, which just isn't fun to me. So I suppose that's it. See you whenever.